God. Oh, I love this car. Ladies and gentlemen, 2000 Honda S2000, the AP1 in a OEM Plus configuration. This car is mostly stock, but we have KW V3 coilovers, set 3 clicks from full stiff on the front, 4 clicks from full soft on the rear. The owner says that he is trying to balance out some of the oversteer tendencies. So we have front PSI at 32, rear at 28, Hankook RS4 tires, 225 up front and 255 in the rear, staggered setup. We've got some Mugen bushings, essentially OEM, but just newer. We've got some WinMax W5 pads and some new Mugen bushings. So a tastefully modified OEM Plus example of a Honda S2000 AP1, which in a OEM Plus configuration, I actually feel is my cup of tea. It's generally a little bit more razor edge than 9,000 RPM redline. And although it doesn't quite make the same power figures, we're still making 240 horsepower, 153 pound-feet of torque from an inline 4. And the question today is, all these years later, is this car still worth it? Now keep in mind, a lot of the things that I love about this car, granted, like, you know, namely the twitchy nature and a little bit more razor edge handling characteristics of an AP1, the owner has attempted to dial out. With the suspension changes, the offset with the tires. God. Oh, I love this car. And the car's not too stiff for some fun canyon carving, even on a bumpy road. Now, as I'm pushing out some of these corners, it does feel more planted than a regular AP1. And that again is usually those changes to dial out some of those twitchy oversteer tendencies of a stock OEM AP1 chassis. We have a proper throttle cable, no drive-by-wire, giving us that beautiful immediate throttle response, easy heel toe. And even though I can't ever get fully comfortable in the S2000 because it's not tall person friendly, especially if you have long legs, you're still able to very easily heel toe this, which is not something that I can say about a lot of modern cars, even at higher price points, that are still enthusiast focused. I'm looking at you, Lotus. And I love Lotuses. I ordered an Amira, but the inputs on this are just like, even though it's not tall person friendly, it's still better dialed in. Oh yes. The transmission on these S2000s is still king, still reigns supreme. Now, of course, there are some benefits with the gear ratios if you will go with an AP2 transmission, but both AP1 and AP2 have such amazing, amazing transmissions. And all these years later, it's still the gold standard. Over 2 decades later, the Honda S2000 transmission is still arguably the best in the business. This is what I compare all other vehicle transmissions to, with the manual. The bolt action rifle, notchiness, precision, proper weighting to the throws, proper distance to the throws, cross shifting is not an issue. It's It's one of those cars where you will just shift even when you don't need to, just for the sake of actually shifting, because it's that enjoyable. And it also doesn't mind being rushed. A lot of manual transmissions don't like that in this day and age. This does not mind. Now the elephant in the room is the price that these go for. When I was looking a few months ago at S2000, because I was considering one myself, a price for a decent example, not terribly high mileage, is going to be running you around 30K. Now the question is, do you want some of the benefits that this car provides, or do you go for something like a Mazda Miata, either a new or slightly used, or a GR86/BRZ? And again, it depends on your preferences, your biases, what you prioritize. I'm very happy with my GR86, but some of the issues include the McPherson strut front suspension. It tends to give way to understeer. It doesn't have the sharpest front end. Have to add some negative camber in the aftermarket. This has a much sharper front end, and part of that comes down to the superior double wishbone front suspension. Oh yes, this transmission is just so nice to use. Love it. Also double clutching, not an issue in the slightest. Just so seamless. But the engine, right? The engine in the S2000 has much more character. It sounds better. It revs to 9,000 RPM. It's the centerpiece. The drivetrain in this vehicle is really the standout feature. The engine, transmission are just amazing, amazing, amazing. And the other things are really well dialed in too. But if that bothers you with the GR86, then you can still buy this car. Now, obviously, warranty, you know, the issues that come with an older used car that's at the same price, you're not getting as much value in certain ways. At least it could be argued. But ultimately, it comes down to where you want to spend your money, because both options are really fantastic. You can't go wrong. So, in modern day, I mean, is this car worth it? I'd argue yes. I think this car has a lot going for it. It's, again, if you're the right person, you're going to care a lot about certain things like the engine, the transmission. You may not care as much about steering feel, because the steering feel, especially in these early EPS units, is not the strongest selling point. In terms of how the owner modified this version, I would say, again, if you aren't as comfortable with approaching oversteer and being at the limit, then having a setup like this is a little bit more conservative. But I would personally prefer a little bit more of that twitchiness, that oversteer prone nature of the S2000 that makes it a little bit sharper and a little bit more thrilling to drive, in my opinion. But again, thank you to Fenton Sun from the Zygreen YouTube channel for making this review possible. Go show him some love. Link in the description. By the way, in case you guys haven't noticed, I'll be rocking some interesting watches on more of these drives. This is the Bulova Lunar Pilot, the other watch worn on the moon, not the Omega Speedmaster. This was 1971, Apollo 15 with a David Scott. So to all my watch nerds out there, you guys might find some interesting things, no longer just my Apple Watch in the videos. Thank you all so much for watching, my friends. Much love. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in that next one.